Well, hello, everyone. I'm Charles Bass from the USD Alumni Association, and welcome to day 3 of USD's Homecoming and Family Week. It has certainly been a unique celebration, especially as we welcome you to Homecoming from Home. We kicked things off with a terrific Torero Tuesday, with more than 2,500 donors helping raise $1 million for USD funds. Yesterday, I hope you tuned in to hear the State of the University address from President Harris, our chief optimist. His brief but inspiring remarks will be available on the Homecoming website later. The mission of the USD Alumni Association is to engage and enrich the Torero community for life. And a big part of that effort involves storytelling. We're excited to present Torero Talks, a chance to hear from 4 inspiring alumni whose stories reflect on their lives and efforts to go beyond the limits. A few housekeeping tips. We are utilizing Zoom webinar today, and we are recording this session. We'll hear from each of our alumni, and at the end of all the presentations, there will be time for questions from the audience. We encourage you to use the Q&A tab, and you can do that at any time during the presentations. First, we will meet Dr. Dina Drake, who earned a master's and doctorate degrees from the Hahn School of Nursing and Health Science. She is a palliative care clinical nurse specialist at Sharp Chula Vista Medical Center. During the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Drake was challenged to find new ways for her sick and dying patients to connect with their loved ones. She pushed beyond the limits to find a way to ease the pain for all involved while adhering to strict HIPAA regulations. Dr. Drake, would you please activate your camera, and welcome to you.
Hey, Charles, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And we've all seen the photos of frontline nurses, respiratory therapists, and physicians caring for critically ill patients with COVID. Maybe your eyes have focused on the protective gear worn by staff, or the physical isolation of the patients, or maybe just the sheer amount of medical equipment needed to sustain a human life. If you're lucky enough to have not had a loved one affected by COVID, perhaps these images didn't impact you emotionally. But imagine if one of these patients were your mother, father, husband, or wife, and you weren't allowed to be at their bedside. Dr. Drake, what was it like in the early days of the pandemic at your hospital, and how did COVID impact you and the patients and families you serve?
Well, I think initially, obviously the first cases of COVID happened in Washington State in the United States. And so the ramp up to the first patients here in Southern California and in our community took a while. And so the executive leadership team, obviously physically prepared the units for the expected influx. But I don't think that anybody could really prepare themselves for the emotional toll that would eventually come to wash over us in terms of the never-ending suffering and death and dying that we witnessed on a daily basis. One of the things that you need to know about our hospital is that in February, we opened a dedicated end-of-life unit, a special place for families to be with their loved ones near the end of their life and to be supported both emotionally, spiritually, in this journey. And we also gave a lot of support to our staff. And it was a really rich environment for a very difficult time. And when COVID struck the South Bay, that turned 180 degrees. And suddenly we were telling families that they couldn't come in, that they couldn't be with their loved ones. Our patients were physically isolated. Even those who were not in the intensive care unit, they were physically isolated. And I think it was devastating in a lot of ways for the patients, for the families, and for the staff caring for them. And this is not how we treat people. This is not how we treat our community. And the first time I had to tell a family of a patient, an elderly male who was dying, that they couldn't come into the hospital, I felt like a monster, honestly. And what I did, because I couldn't stand the thought of them not being with him, at least in some way, is I friended the son on Facebook on my personal cell phone and went up into his father's room and FaceTimed him so that he could tell his father that he loved him. And I could actually see them from the window of the ICU. The family was standing out in the parking lot. And they were just staring up at the window. And I felt like, this is the best we can do. And I also felt like this is the worst thing that we could possibly do to these families. I think, after a while, a lot of the nurses were doing the same things. They were using Zoom on their cell phones. They were using FaceTime. Definitely our emergency department nurses and our intensive care nurses, our critical care nurses were doing that. And at one point, the corporate headquarters sent out an email that said, please don't do that anymore. Please don't use Zoom. Please don't use FaceTime. That's not a secure encrypted application, and you are putting the healthcare information and the billing information of patients in the hospital at risk from hackers being able to use those applications to gain access to our network. And this the possibility that we would not be able to use any sort of video visitation was just unacceptable to me, because it was such a key medium for, first of all, families being able to see what was actually happening to their loved one. And that is important, because if you are deciding whether or not to continue aggressive treatments or discontinue them, you have to see and understand what those things are. And beyond that, this is the only way that a family could actually see and speak to their loved one, and to tell them that they love them, perhaps for the last time. And so I went down to our nursing administration office and found our chief nurse officer, Chrissy Baslier, who's a huge end-of-life and palliative care proponent, and said, hey, I saw this email, and am I going to get fired if I keep doing this? Because I kind of feel like I have to keep doing this. It's really important. And our CEO, Pablo Velez, who is also, by the way, a USD alum, he graduated, I believe, 2006 doctorate degree, overheard me. And he said, no, of course not, Dina. Don't worry about it. And literally an hour and a half later, a senior systems analyst came down from our corporate headquarters, found me, and set up an iPad with a telemedicine program that we could do encrypted video visits. And I can tell you, this was an absolute lifeline for families, and still continues to be even today when restrictions are still in place for visitation.
It's amazing to think you have so much to worry about with COVID, and here you have to worry about, am I going to lose my job because of FaceTime with these patients, which is such a lifesaver for the families who just are desperate for that information. So talk a little bit more about the utilization of the telemedicine technology.
Right. So this is obviously a picture of one of us with our cell phones in a Ziploc bag. It's very hard to disinfect cell phones, if any of you have ever tried to do that to your iPhone. So this is what we were often doing in the early days of COVID. And again, a lot of patients came in through our emergency department, not even with their own belongings, with their own phone. And so a lot of our nurses, including myself, use FaceTime in particular, which I don't think was the greatest idea, because I ended up being friends with a lot of the community, and they got to see all of my personal information. But of course, at the time, I just didn't really care all that much. And I don't think any of the nurses and physicians and respiratory therapists and all of the staff who were doing this in those early days actually cared very much about sharing our own personal information during these times when access was so limited. Oh, and here's a picture of us using an iPad. This is actually a very uncomfortable thing to do. I had a bracket on the back of an iPad, and I would literally be holding this above somebody's bed, especially for those patients in the ICU, in a fixed position, trying to see if they could actually see their loved one, if the patient could see them. There were a lot of technical difficulties with this at times due to different smartphone technology. But again, this small piece of technology was so incredibly critical for our family and our communities to be able to connect with their loved one, to be able to see them, to talk to them, and to really understand what was happening with them.
You know, it seems like such a small thing, but it's really such a huge thing. And we could probably talk about this for hours and just about your experiences. But I guess I hate to, move us along, but my last question would be, how has the pandemic experience changed you?
Well, I could spend time talking about how the suffering and the grief and just the sheer number of people who have died in our hospital has just caused some days that were filled with sadness and grief. I could talk about that, but I think what's more important to talk about, especially these days when we have a lot of political divisiveness, a lot of issues around racism that have taken to the streets, rightfully so. I want to talk about what I've gotten from our community and from my colleagues in terms of the positive aspects that have come out of this pandemic. And I think the first thing is that the community in the South Bay has been so incredibly generous. They have literally sent meals for months to frontline workers. They sent cards and letters of support. They did flyovers of our hospitals. We had people applauding and howling at 8 o'clock at night like a wolf, which I thought was very strange. I don't know how that happened.
I live downtown and I get to hear that
You get to hear that
I still
too?
hear it. I still hear it
from time to time.
There's a guy with a vizubila, or one of those things you hear at soccer games. So,
and that has kept us going, honestly. There, with all these restrictions for visitation, I have had families be so grateful for these video visits, for just the few moments that they might be able to spend with their loved one, which to me feel very inadequate, but to them mean everything. And the gratitude that they feel and they express towards us has been really overwhelming and amazing and humbling. I think from a healthcare team perspective, we watch out for each other and our moods and try to lift each other up instead of finding fault with each other. The acts of kindness between colleagues is amazing. The compassion that we show each other and our patients, our families, our communities is so uplifting. And it's during this pandemic when we are locked in and separated and isolated from each other, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally. It's amazing to me how open-hearted and compassionate and kind people are to each other during this time. And I like to focus on that instead of always focusing on the grief and the suffering, because that is what's going to move us forward through this pandemic and hopefully into next year when is behind us.
Yes, 2021. We cannot wait. Well,
Right.
Dr. Drake, thank you so much. Talking about being full of gratitude. We are full of gratitude for you and your colleagues. Thanks for the work you do and for the sacrifices you've made. Because of your compassion and your willingness to push beyond the barriers, you really helped give your patients and their families peace when they needed it most. So we're very grateful for you. Thank you. So just a reminder, everybody, wear your masks, wash your hands, please, if for no other reason than to pay respect to Dr. Drake and her colleagues. And a reminder, please add questions in the Q&A tab down below for Dr. Drake, and we'll see her again at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much. Our next presenter is Salvador Chava Mercado, a psychology major from the class of 2006. Chava, please start sharing your screen while I tell the audience all about you. Chava is an entrepreneur, business owner, firewalker, and true blue Torero. Years ago, he was struck by a window that had fallen from 10 stories above as he walked down a sidewalk. Precisely 3 years after that accident, he set out and succeeded in climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's tallest mountain. Please welcome Chava Mercado. And Chava, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Charles. First, I want to say thank you to Dr. Dina Drake. I think that was wonderful. So we appreciate so much what you do. I'll try to line things up a little bit. And so even though my story does start with a little bit of an accident, I want to take a positive spin to it. So I'm sure there's probably a few familiar faces in here. Mom, if you're there, hello. Welcome to Zoom. And so what I want to start by is really with the accident. So I want to say thank you to the University of San Diego for allowing me to share my journey and the story of reaching the tallest mountain in Africa. I'll start at the beginning, and that happened with an accident. This was on November 20th, 2013. I was walking down the sidewalk in downtown LA. I had just gotten a new job. I was starting with a big company the very next day. And I was excited. So I was actually walking down the sidewalk to the mall so I can buy a new pair of pants and a new suit. Not knowing that right here, I don't know if you guys can see the arrow, but this is the building where the window fell as I was walking, and I was struck right, luckily, at the very top of my head. I was injured from my neck. And so I don't want to focus too much on the incident and the accident. What I want to talk about is like what happened really afterwards. But just know that there was 3 years of physical therapy and some uncomfortable moments. And so as I moved from the accident, about 6 months later, I met Susan Erschler, and this was a turning point in my life without me really knowing. As I had mentioned, I just got a new job and I was working for DirecTV. These are the offices here in El Segundo, and they brought Susan Erschler to do as a motivational speaker. Susan Erschler holds the Guinness World Record for being the first couple, her and her boyfriend at the time, now husband, to climb the 7 summits of the world. That means the top 7 mountains in each of the 7 continents. So I am not a climber. I've never done even camping or anything remotely. But she was also at the same time running a $300 million company. And she talked the parallels about climbing the corporate ladder and climbing a mountain. And I was hooked. I was fascinated with what she was saying. As we were going through the presentation last week, I realized that this picture, let me see if I can zoom in for you guys. I am wearing a string around my neck, and she called that the goal string. So she said that the Sherpas, when she climbed Mount Everest, would tie a string around her neck so that she would return safely from her goal. And once she accomplished that, she would be able to cut the string. So it was a way of sort of reminding her of a bigger purpose. So that string, she put it around my neck, and about 2.5 years later, I began my journey to Kilimanjaro. So I asked her, like, what is the best mountain to go to? And she said, Kilimanjaro should be where you should start. So I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So I mentioned the accident was on November 20th of 2013. I landed in Tanzania in Kilimanjaro on November 20th, 2016. Of course, that was planned. It was more of a gratitude. I was grateful to be alive. I was grateful to walk, and I was incredibly overwhelmed with the feelings of this opportunity to climb, Africa's tallest mountain. I'm not gonna go through the hundreds and thousands of probably pictures that I took and and a lot of video, but I do want to share a few pictures of this journey. So if you've never climbed Kilimanjaro, or if you've never seen anything about the mountain, it takes about 2 on the third day to actually get a view of the mountain. So this picture is actually on the third day of the 7-day climb. The first couple of days, you're surrounded by forest and trees, and you can't really see the mountain. It's a beautiful green location, and then it changes. It's a little bit more deserted, and then finally you're able to see the mountain. Right here, I'm gonna show you guys a few of my favorite pictures of the journey. Remember, I'm from Southern California, sunny San Diego, now in Los Angeles. So my first experience camping was actually on the mountain. So it was a little bit of a quick learning curve for me. So these are a couple of my favorite pictures. On the left is actually we're inside a cloud, and this is right the day before summit day. And on the right, I'm perched on the top of the mountain on summit night. So this is around 4 or 5 in the morning. As the sunrise is coming up, you can see that you're above, I remember this moment very vividly when I look back and I saw the sunrise. I'd been climbing for 5-6 hours before during midnight, and it's cold, guys. It's very cold. So this is one of the coolest things. So I think USD really likes this picture because I'm a big Torero blue fan. I love my university. So when I let them know that I was going to do this, they gave me this flag, and I proudly show this flag at the top of the mountain. The height for Kilimanjaro is 19,341 feet. But very interestingly, the picture on the left and the picture on the right are like the exact same location. When you reach the summit, it almost looks like you're like sandy beach, like we're earthly. And then if you guys see in the very back, it's about 20 to 30-minute walk from the summit. There's this huge wall of ice that really stands tall at the summit of Africa. And it's something that I will never forget. The stuff that I really want to focus besides the accident are the learning lessons. It took me 3 years to get to the summit from the accident, but in retrospect, I know that I had to turn something negative into a positive. So I learned that circumstances, do not define me, that I had to make something, of the incident. I've mentioned that the accident was just the beginning, and many things have happened ever since that have really propelled me, and I've been extremely grateful every time I walk down the street in downtown Los Angeles. I am grateful if a window doesn't fall on my head. I say this is a good day. But I want to just share with everybody, shift your perspective. I know we're going through a difficult year. Try to look for that hidden miracle in whatever it is that's happening. I do not recommend for a window to fall on your head to start looking for the positive, and to practice this stuff daily. The second thing that I want to share from this story is the gold string. To me, that was life-changing. I wore that string. It's ugly. It gets in the way, and it's not a pretty scene. But I wore the first one for 2.5 years. Right now, I'm on my third string. So these are my goal strings that I have for long-term goals. The second string was a red one, and I climbed Mount Elbrus. That was my second summit of the world. It's the tallest mountain in Europe. And as I mentioned in here, you first want to have a commitment to yourself, a long-term goal. I recommend 18 to 24 months. Then mentioning it to people who actually support you, because there will be people. When I mentioned people that I wanted to climb Africa's tallest mountain, they're like, you can barely walk after the accident. I don't think you should be doing this. But as you commit to yourself, then later commit to people who support you, as you get closer, you can make it, you can make an announcement publicly. So I can't share with you guys what this is yet, but in a few months I should be able to. And lastly, I just want to say, document your journey, have fun, and enjoy life, because every day is a beautiful day. I think that's all I wanted to share with you guys. Charles?
Well, Chava, your story of perseverance is as remarkable as your enthusiasm for all things USD. So thank you for sharing that with us. And we look forward to having more questions with you at the end of our next presentations. Thanks again, Chava.
Ciao.
So next up, we will hear from Dr. Kisha Brown. Dr. Kisha earned a master's degree in leadership studies from USD's School of Leadership and Education Sciences. She is an author, poet, educator, and entrepreneur who has dedicated her career to the motivation, professional development, and overall well-being of leaders from all backgrounds, while holding a particular affinity for women of color and those from traditionally underserved communities. Please welcome Dr. Kisha, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Charles, and good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this wonderful event this afternoon, Homecoming from Home. I love it. For those of you who don't know me, I recently returned to the USD community by way of my third book of poetry and my first children's book entitled The Love of 10,000. And it was actually featured on the Tiny Torero's Storytime podcast this past spring. The book is centered around love. As a poet, that's my thing, right? And it's centered around love and empowerment and the spiritual guidance of our ancestors. And so, in that same tradition, I'd like to honor those who I'm connected to and who are connected to me. First, I'd like to honor every Black human being, those living and non-living, especially my big sister, Jacqueline Renee Polk. I honor Breonna Taylor. I honor George Floyd and so many others whose lives mattered before and still matter now. I honor my Muskogee Nation family who continue to teach me the importance of how we're all connected to all things living and non-living. And I honor each of you for being here in this moment today. Now, as Charles mentioned, I did graduate from Souls, but we weren't quite Souls when I was there. We were still leadership studies, and I am a graduate of the class of 2000. And some years later, quite a few years later, I earned my doctorate from Teachers College, Columbia University in New York. And while I was in my doctoral program, one of the many theories we examined was transformative learning theory. And in a nutshell, what that is when we learn from our own lived experiences, those life lessons, right? And we take those lessons in and we change our own lives. We lead ourselves because, again, leadership, self-leadership being the guiding principle. We lead ourselves into making change while encouraging others to learn from their lives and make change. Eventually, our hope is to create positive change in the world around us. So what I learned is that it takes a lot of work, a lot of digging, a lot of soul searching to really learn from those life's lessons. So today, what I'd like to do is to share with you a piece of my transformative learning journey. And this journey occurred shortly after the death of my sister in 2002. Once we're done with watching that video, we'll all come back, and I will share with you my 7 personal lessons on living beyond the limits and living our liberation out loud. Kara?
I never knew that level of pain as a grown woman. Yes, I met death at the age of 7, but did not fully understand what it was saying to me. However, this time, the voices of death and doubt came together, rocked me to my core, and introduced a new voice. This voice said, "You can bring together all these women to heal, but you couldn't help save one, the only one that mattered. You're out here with your sister circles trying to support all these women. You couldn't even save your own sister." This voice spoke in a tone I never heard before. It felt like it knew me, saw everything that I've ever done and reduced it to nothing. This voice was ruthless, and its name was Imposter Syndrome. And I have been listening and hustling for its approval ever since. Over the last 18 years, I impersonated so many others. White women, white men, Black middle-aged men, completely abandoned the me that was free and familiar. I became unrecognizable, and the real me was hidden under a blanket of insecurity and anxiety. I tried anything so I could fit into all the hate-filled boxes I chose to work, study, live, and love in. I thought if I could please everyone, they would accept me, and imposter syndrome would see it was wrong and would leave me be. I eventually realized that this way of thinking was faulty, and it was destroying me. However, it took years of identity destruction while existing in a sunken place of hate, masked as tolerance, to come to this realization. So, the me that oppression built had to disappear. I needed to cry myself a river, swim in it alone, re-emerge worn down, had to get reborn and find myself right back here. I really shouldn't have to explain any of this to you, but I realize I do, because you don't know me. At least you don't know me outside of the master's narrative or some post that you read. Understand that there is more to me than braids, beauty, and botched workshops. I'm more than what others can comprehend. I am Black. I am strong. I am that dope feeling you feel when you hear a Jill Scott song. I am loud. I am proud. I am crazy. After 3 breast cancer scares and 3 concussions, my thinking may be a little bit hazy. I am creative. I am wretched. I love when the folks come together and talk mad-ish. I am compassionate. I am a leader. I am that proud baby girl who gave her mama a fly 2-seater. I am a motivator. I am hood. I am ravishing. I am a child of Inglewood. I am determined and detrimental. I'm the one your brother, uncle, and possibly your pops wants to get into. I am passionate. I am erotic. I'm the one you might just need to have to search her back pocket. I am a bossy boss. I am the one that shows up no matter the cost. I am a savage all day long. I was savagingly savage long before the stallion dropped her song. I am bad. I am mad. I am the best woman you never had. I am scared and I am sacred. I work hard and I'm far from basic. I am compassionate and heartless. I can hate every fiber of your being and still hold you down regardless. Now that I have paved this new road and have reclaimed my heart, spirit, and mind, I will never again allow myself to be defined or undermined by anybody else. And so, with that, Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Oh, she's bad news, isn't she? Thank you so much, Kara. There's so much power and importance to sharing our stories, or what church folk, what we say, sharing our testimony. So I thank you all so much for allowing me to do so this afternoon. Now I'd like to share with you my 7 personal lessons I've gained from living this experience. But before I do that, I want to be clear what this list is not. This list does not negate in any way, shape, or form the existence of the very real, structural, and systemic forms of oppression in our society. The list does not ignore the collective trauma, loss, and grieving that has occurred this year and years prior. There's one more point, and this is most important to me as a woman of faith. And I know that we're coming into this space with all different ways of knowing around faith, religion, spirituality, but I want to say this. This list does not discount the fact that when it's all said and done, God is still in control, and that Spirit of God lives in each and every one of us every single day. Okay? So, my lessons. Number 1, tell the truth about limiting narratives. What are their purpose? Where did they come from? Whether they're from society, your community, your family, or that self-talk that we all have. What is the purpose? What is the usefulness? And what's missing from those narratives, right? Because we always know that there's more to the story than what the story holds. Number 2, do not fake it till you make it. I know many of us have heard this advice so many times. Fake it till you make it, fake it till you make it. Well, what if you make it and then you can't keep faking it? That's a problem. So I say use the acronym ASK for support in order to make it. Ask coming from scripture. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open unto you. So ask yourself first, what do I need, or what do others need? How do I connect with others to find out what is happening and what's needed? Seek out sound counsel. Sound counsel. Not all counsel is sound counsel. We know that. And as you're thinking about and asking others who you should touch base with to help feed the need, whether it's an emotional need you have or what's going on around you, really be clear about those mentors, those sponsors, those people who can assist you in getting that need met. Understanding, using emotional intelligence to understand what their bandwidth is, because right now we're all balancing a lot. At the same time, understanding that when we are connected with one another, there's a mutual benefit there. So that's number 2. Number 3, I talk about self-leadership plus self-awareness plus self-care equals a transformative leader. I have a really cute story I want to share very quickly. A dear friend of mine, she is a leader in her community. She is an entrepreneur. She's a wife. She's a mother of 3. She's homeschooling. She's doing all the things that we're all doing and then some, right? What this wonderful leader does, and she's very keen about because she's touched in with herself, she's very self-aware. She has told her family, I need 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour from everything. And so what she does is she goes and hides in her car for an hour. And in that hour, she rejuvenates her way, right? She either listens to music, she scrolls mindlessly through her phone, or she just simply looks up at the sky and remembers her connection to more. That allows her to re-engage with everyone in a very different way. So that is my little equation for that. Number 4, end your entanglement with people pleasing if you are so entangled. And yes, that is a nod to Jada Pinkett Smith. We are built right now on a culture of people pleasing, the social media culture especially. Please like my post, please follow me. And the question is, what happens if they don't? Who are you? How well are you? That's something that I had to learn, and really I'm continuing to pull myself away from that need to people please. And that seems to be a lifelong journey. I'll tell you how that goes. Number 5, surround yourself with limit pushers, not trying to people please your group, but people who are encouraging themselves and pushing themselves to do more and encouraging you to do more in your own life. That may be a very small circle, and that's okay. Number 6 is define and acknowledge liberation in your life daily. This has been a godsend for me during this pandemic because it's so very easy to get caught up in all the things you cannot do. I can't go outside. I can't go outside without a mask. I can't. But what are you blessed to be able to do in this moment? What does liberation, I say liberation is a connection between love and freedom. What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? Do those things or that one thing each day. And each day may be something different. Allow yourself to experience that. And number 7, and if I did this list in a pyramid, this would actually be the foundation of the list for me. And that's always remember your connection to greater, whether that's greater spiritually, whether it's greater in humanity or beyond, because we are all connected in very different ways to the world around us. And we're always connected to what is best in ourselves if we allow ourselves to recognize that. And so as I leave you today, the one thought I have for each of you is whatever is happening right now in your life. So yes, the racial reckoning, yes, the pandemic, but we were living life before all of this was happening, right? Whatever is happening in your life right now, it's helping you to pivot right back to your purpose. Allow it to do so. Thank you, and peace and blessings. Charles?
Well, thank you, Dr. Kisha, for sharing your story and for sharing those lessons. And next, we are thrilled to welcome Joy Utomi Hartman, a 2011 graduate of the USD School of Law. She is a Deputy Attorney General in the California Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General. Her path to the Department of Justice was somewhat atypical. She was born in Nigeria and immigrated with her family to the United States as a young girl in hopes of a brighter future. Joy is passionately committed to promoting diversity, inclusion, and cultural awareness in the San Diego legal community, recently serving as president and executive board member of the Earl B. Gilliam Barr Foundation. Joy's commitment to diversity is particularly inspired by the words of Jesse Jackson, "When everyone is included, everyone wins." And I should also point out that in addition to being a rock star in her day-to-day life, she is also being recognized by the School of Law with a 2020 Rising Star Award. Please welcome Joy Utomi Hartman.
Thank you so much, Charles. And hello, USD family. It's really great to be able to virtually speak with you all today. So as you know, the title for today's talk is Beyond the Limits, Stories of Success and Opportunity. And that word success really stuck with me. What does that mean? How can you achieve it? And I think more specifically, what people want to know is, how long does it take to achieve that success? And I thought about it, and let's say you want to be the most successful basketball player of all time, right? Specifically, the most successful three-point shooter of all time. How long would it take? Well, I have an answer for you: 48 years. And I know you're probably thinking, okay, that doesn't make sense. Most NBA players are in their 20s. So how could it possibly take 48 years, almost twice the lifespan of the average NBA player, to become, the best three-point shooter? Well, I'll tell you. But first, I actually want to talk about a different story, about something that's I know way more about than basketball, and that is my family. Because when I think about success and what success I have achieved in life, I think specifically about my family, God, my mother. And I want to tell you about my mother. My mother, Stella, was born in Nigeria in I won't say the year because I don't want to reveal her age. But at the time she was born, Nigeria wasn't even Nigeria. And actually we can take down that, yeah. Oh yeah, there you go. There's a mom, say hi, Mom. Yeah, the time she was born, Nigeria wasn't even Nigeria. It was still, under the rule of England. It had yet to gain its independence. And as a young girl, my mom was always studious. She loved a lot of things, but she had such a passion for books and learning that she studied library science at one of Nigeria's top universities. And there's a story I love to tell about her that I feel like really speaks to who she is and who I've become. So in 1978, 42 years ago, nationwide protests erupted across Nigeria in response to a government's plan to hike up student food costs. And the college students protested nationwide, and the protests were massive, and they soon became really violent, so violent that the government sent in the military to quash the violence. And by the time all was said and done, about 3 universities had shut down entirely, and as many as 20 college students would be killed. My mom was a college student at that time, and in solidarity with her fellow students, she took to the streets and she was marching. And during one of the marches, she got worried when she saw a large group of students just rushing to a specific area in a frenzy. So she followed them. And when she got there, she saw a mass of students surrounding a police officer who was on the ground. And the officer was on the ground, he was alone, and he was bleeding from a severe head injury, I believe. And given the recent killings of students at the hands of authorities and military and police, the crowd was chanting and yelling and angry, wanting to kill this police officer who was begging for his life. Now remember, you see my mom, she was a library student, she was a book nerd, she was slender, non-confrontational, very stylish, of course, but also shy. And as she stood there, though, she knew what she was seeing wasn't right. And, she didn't know the specifics of this officer, whether he was guilty of some crime or not, but she knew that a street mob could not act as judge, jury, and executioner. So she stepped forward in front of dozens of her fellow students who were on the brink of violence. And she used her body to shield the officer. And she pleaded with the students to move on, to spare his life, to achieve justice a different way. And they listened because she spoke with so much passion and confidence in her voice. The crowd listened, and that man's life was saved. So after that moment, my mom went on back to school. She graduated, got married, became a librarian, and just continued to live her life, but she wanted more. And now she had these dreams of becoming a lawyer and being in a position where she could fight for justice and fight for the oppressed. But she knew that in Nigeria, being a woman at that time, her professional opportunities would be limited. So after a lot of thought and prayer, my parents, with their 3 kids in tow, including me, got on a plane and flew to the US, a country that they'd never been to before, in which they didn't know a single soul. And like most immigrants, they soon realized that life in America is hard, and attaining that American dream is even harder. So my parents had 2 more children, 5 now in total. Shout out to my brothers. Money was tight, and the reality of making sacrifices to make ends meet really set in. So as the years passed, my mom's dreams kind of became obscured with reality. So that's where I come in. You see, I too was also a quiet, bookish kid. I spent my childhood with my nose buried in a book. I love the Babysitter Club books. But like my mom, I wanted to break out of my shell and find a way to, speak with authority and confidence on things that mattered to me. So I decided to go to law school, and that brought me to USD. And I had a wonderful law school experience here. But of all the things I'm thankful to USD for is providing me with the support and opportunity to break out of my shell and grow into somebody who was more tenacious and confident and resilient. And you can take down the picture now. And that's me. And I would need all of these skills to make it to where I am today. I first worked for the AG's office as an intern in the summer of 2009, and it was amazing. I spent the summer understanding what it means to be a criminal appellate prosecutor, what it means to represent the people of California, what it means to ensure that our laws are enforced equally and justly to everyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their income. and to be part of trying to make that change. So I knew when I graduated, I wanted to be a deputy attorney general in the criminal appeals section of the AG's office. And fast forward to 9 years later, here I am living that dream. And while I've been in the office, I've had so many wonderful opportunities working on prosecuting cases from thefts to sexual assaults to capital murder, being able to work on the front lines of interpreting new legislation and case law, and that same tenacity and confidence and resilience that I've been able to develop through my life led me to what has been the highlight of my career so far. In 2018, we had a case in our office, one of many cases, where the California Supreme Court granted review. And this case had to deal with a criminal defendant who had been civilly committed as a mentally disordered offender. And I had been working on these types of cases for years. So when this case was granted review, I wanted it and I got it. And for the better part of 3 months, I worked day and night, researching every aspect of the laws involved, pouring through legislative materials. And I filed my first brief in Cal Supreme, and a year later, when that case was calendared, I argued my first argument in the California Supreme Court as they were sitting in San Francisco. And that was me that day. I was very excited. And believe me when I say I had to draw upon every fiber of tenacity, confidence, and resilience I had in me while standing before that court, defending my case and fielding the many questions the 7-justice panel threw at me. But it paid off because I won that case and by a unanimous decision. So it really was to date one of the greatest highlights of my career so far. But I can truly say that my success that day and any success I've had thus far really didn't start with me. All the skills that my mother learned in overcoming her fear of public speaking and growing her desire to speak power to justice, she was able to pass that on to me. So really my journey started in 1978 when my mom saved that policeman and decided she wanted to go to law school. And just a few years before my mom's kind of life-changing moment in a tiny town in Virginia, there was another man, a man named Jack, who was on a similar journey in a sense. And like my parents, he also had 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. But Jack's restless son was always wandering off in the nearby woods that was filled with bears. So Jack needed a way to keep his son out of trouble and out of a bear's mouth. I promise you this is going somewhere. So Jack built a makeshift rickety basketball hoop that was horrible. Maybe it looks something like this, right? The hoop was so bad and the rim on the hoop was so badly made that any shot that was shot in, even if it grazed it, it would bounce out. So only the perfectly placed shots would go in. But Jack's son, Dell, loved this hoop and he spent all summer playing on it and actually became really good on it because of the poor design. He became really good at making the shots and making the best shots. And he became such a good shooter, like a really good shooter, that he went on to have a basketball scholarship to Virginia Tech and went on to have a 16-year NBA career, from which he retired as like the Charlotte Hornets all-time leading scorer. But most importantly, Dell was a 3-point shot specialist. And during his career, he made nearly 40% of every 3-point shot he took. And to put that into comparison, if you're not a huge basketball fan, I, for example, make 0% of every 3-pointer I take. So he was really good, right? But as good as he wasn't the greatest 3-point shooter at any point in NBA history. But he passed that ramshackle basketball hoop down to his son, Steph. And his son spent as much time practicing his shot on the hoop as his old man had before him. And with now the wisdom of that NBA veteran, his dad coaching him, he became Steph Curry. And that son, Jack's grandson, is Steph Curry, the greatest 3-point shooter in NBA history, who now holds the record for the most 3-pointers in a single season. And Steph is only 32, but we now know that his journey to become successful didn't start with him. His dream started back in 1972 on that rickety, horrible basketball court that his grandfather made to keep his son away from bears. And it took 48 years across 3 generations for Steph Curry to become the greatest three-point shooter ever. So when I think of my success, I think of my family's success, I think of my parents' success, I think of my mom's success, and the hard work that they've put in. And my mom, by the way, recently decided to pursue her dream again. And in 2007, she earned her Juris Doctorate degree. So I hope you're clapping out there. And don't get me started on my dad. I don't want to leave him out because his journey is certainly amazing. He was a young athlete, actor, broadcaster turned engineer, political leader, community leader, and now part-time cowboy. I need another 10 minutes just to tell his story, but we don't have that kind of time. So I guess as I finish my talk, I want to remind you of the very first question I asked, and it wasn't how long does it take to become successful? It was, what is success? And I didn't answer that because I can't. Every person has to find that answer within themselves. But I will say that I hope you don't measure your success based on stats and numbers. I hope you measure your success based on invaluable and intangible things like love and family and justice and tenacity and inclusion and confidence and resilience, because it's the success that you build for yourself in those areas that's going to be the foundation for your family and for your future generations. So I just want to thank you all for listening and joining the USD family in today's talk. And I wish all of you listening abundant success in your lives.
Well, thank you, Joy, for those inspiring words and for sharing your story with the Torero community. And now I want to invite Dr. Drake and Dr. Kisha and Chava to turn their cameras back on and join us. We do have a few questions. I'm going to just, again, thank you all so much. It's just inspiring to hear from you. So, we'll just jump into the questions real quick. So for Dr. Drake, do you think telemedicine is here to stay? And what are the positives and negatives to this approach?
Well, part of me wishes that it wasn't here to stay, but I know that it's actually a really valuable tool. And the reason I wish it wasn't is because I wish we could have families back at the bedside right now where they belong, because it's so vitally important. But at the same time, I understand, because of the community that I serve in the South Bay, which is a lot of either underinsured or uninsured people, that access to healthcare is difficult, and being able to spend time with a healthcare provider is vitally important for our community. And if this is one of the ways that we can make a connection with our community, then we have to use it. And I think it's a lot easier for some people to be able to make that connection through a video visit than an in-person visit. And so I do believe it's here to stay. I think there's value in it. And at the same time, I wish it would just go away so we could have these families back at the bedside.
I get that. Yeah. Yeah. We're in alumni relations here, not nearly nowhere on the scale compared to nursing, but we are handshakers and huggers, and it's a challenge for sure. So, well, thank you for that. Chava, how about you? Several questions, but one that I want to ask you is, what kind of preparation, what kind of training did you do to prepare for the climb?
First, I also worked at the alumni relations, and I agree with Charles. We're huggers and handshakers, so I missed you guys. Well, living in Southern California, there's not any tall mountains around. So the best thing that I actually got a training mask, and I found this on the internet. This is what athletes use to prevent oxygen from getting into your lungs so you actually expand. And I would climb up and down the stairs with a backpack with weight on it. And I totally ripped that off of Susan. She told me that's what she would do. She would put a backpack on, put weight on, and go up and down the stairs for months at a time. So it was not like a 2-hour deal. So that's what I did.
Well, and just a quick little story. I saw on Instagram a few months ago, a buddy just reached out to you and said, "Hey, I'm climbing Mount Whitney tomorrow. Do you want to go with me?" So you didn't do any training for that.
No,
right?
Mount Whitney is a little bit lower. I hope he was here tonight. Mount Whitney is about 14.5. So I was like, yeah, let's go do it.
That's nothing.
But it was really fun. So I'm really grateful for the opportunities, of course.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Brown or Dr. Kisha, what is the name of your children's book? I didn't look it up, but somebody asked that question.
Sure, no problem. It's The Love of 10,000.
The Love.
And yes, The Love of 10,000. It's based on Dr. Maya Angelou's poem, Our Grandmothers. And in it, she basically says, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And so that's where I borrowed the title from.
And you gave a plug to the Tiny Torero Storytime podcast, which
did.
you can go to the USD Alumni Association web. You can go to the YouTube channel for the University of San Diego Alumni Association, and all the Tiny Torero podcasts are there. They're also available at our website, which is alumni.sandiego.edu. And I think there is an archive there that has your story. So it was great for you to share that. So Joy, talk about, how did USD help kind of play a role in your success today?
USD was really, as kind of mentioned a little bit, was really kind of the springing board for me to just learn about all the different ways it could, help to affect society. And, the community at USD was so just welcoming and open, filled with so many opportunities. And it really just, gave me the opportunity to engage in leadership roles, learn what that, what that meant, what that entailed. And when I graduated, to kind of take those skills to try to help my community.
That's great. Well, it's fun to talk to all of you, to have you as part of the Torero family. Joy, I know you have two siblings who are USD alumni as well, one of whom we've featured in a program I call USD Chats with Charles. So your brother Edred, who is an actor, also available on our website at alumni.sandiego.edu. But thank you to all of you. What's that?
I said, and they're both watching, so shout out to Moses and Edred.
All right. Well, Moses and Edred, nice to have you with us. And again, to Dr. Drake and Dr. Kisha and to Chava and Joy, we are so grateful for your time today. Someone did ask if it's possible to purchase the video that you shared, Dr. Kisha. We will have this recorded.
YouTube.
Okay, you can find it on YouTube. So good. Well, it's great to have you all. Any final comments? Again, we really appreciate you sharing your stories of how you went beyond the limits. Any last comments, Dr. Drake?
Well, I would just like to say, I didn't get to listen to anyone's presentation before today, and I was spellbound and so amazed and inspired by you all. I can't even tell you how honored I am to be in your company, because what amazing, inspiring, uplifting stories you've all told. So thank you.
That's great. And Joy, how about yourself? Any last comments?
I actually want to mention something that Dr. Kisha said that really resonated with me, which is, live authentically, live your truth. Remember you are grounded, lean on your faith, and just live a life that's authentic.
Fantastic. Well, let's go to Dr. Kisha then with any last words of advice.
Go back to my pyramid here, and thinking about how we're always connected to greater.
Very good. Chava, Mr. Enthusiasm.
I would say watch out when you're walking down the sidewalk, construction buildings. And, I love everybody. I love you guys. So thank you, Charles, for the opportunities.
Well, again, to the four of you, thank you so much for being a part of our inaugural virtual Torero Talks. We look forward to seeing you on campus sometime soon. We're so grateful for you, and we're really glad and proud to call you all Toreros. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And with that, we will say that's the end of Torero Talks. Thanks so much to everybody for being a part of this. Thank you so much to Kara Marsh Prophet for her help. And again, to our panelists, we're very grateful for you. We are about halfway through Homecoming and Family Week with more fantastic events to come. So tune in tomorrow night at 6 p.m. for the fabulous Torero Casino Night with entertainment, prize drawings, amazing live and silent auctions, and yes, a singing Elvis. It's free to register at the website there, sandiego.edu/HFW. On Saturday, USD celebrates commencement virtually. And then I invite you to join us at 4 o'clock for a live webcast of the Big Blue Bash. Join Diego Torero and alumni, students, faculty, and friends for a fun-filled hour with prizes, trivia, and more. And we'll wrap this festive week with a virtual version of a favorite USD tradition, our Alumni and Family Mass, which will be streamed at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday. Immediately following Mass, we'll have a tribute to the class of 1970, our Golden Toreros, as well as the announcement of the Torero Parent of the Year. And finally, I want to remind you that you can all go to the marketplace to see our sponsors and support alumni and community-owned businesses. We are so grateful to you for joining us today. Thanks again to our inspiring alumni speakers, and go Toreros.